Let's start off this video by thanking user Hardboiled Entertainment for donating $30 to the channel in request for this particular video, and for me to look at this film again. So, it had been a good while since I had even thought about it, but I do like the idea of cataloging thoughts on the DCEU before it enters its next phase, quote-unquote. I started off with a rewatching of Man of Steel, a film that I didn't hate and felt like didn't get a chance from critics when it came out upon first impression. Thought it had its flaws, but it is what it is. I took it for what it was, and it just seemed like another Zack Snyder film. Style over substance, a couple of faux pas, so on and so forth. Thing is, I never properly analyzed it. Not as a critic. So I took another look through a different lens and thought about this a bit more. Let's go through this act by act. I think that Man of Steel actually leads off really well. When it comes to Krypton, I enjoy the look of the technology and how it feels otherworldly. It should. It never made much sense to me for Krypton to look all futuristic and such. It seems like whenever we think of advanced technology, our brains default to some sort of a faux cyberpunk or something along those lines. We don't really think of alien technology as utilizing things differently, that the angle's looking different, that the sky would look different, that the way that they transport themselves would be different. We seem to default to the same things of spaceships and teleportation. There's a little bit of that here, but there's some other elements that almost seem a bit primal, which is something I liked about it. I don't know how something can be primal and advanced at the same time, but it certainly felt that way. Not to mention the look of the Phantom Zone having almost a liquid or ice effect to it. It was just different, and I like that kind of a different. Now, what I didn't like about this opening was the color palette. Everything seems kind of washed out, or a mix of gunmetal and brown. It felt like I was playing Gears of War. Then again, that's admittedly a minor gripe that does get overshadowed by Russell Crowe as Jor-El and Michael Shannon as General Zod. I really like both of their performances in this film, but especially Shannon's General Zod. It is unique in how he portrays Zod not just as a military leader, but as a zealot who believes in his soul that it is his job to defend the Kryptonian people, and to do so he must control the Kryptonian people because they are headed to death. Now, let's move on a little bit. When we go to the early days of Clark Kent traveling North America, let's address the elephant in the room of Pa Kent. Now, I get the intention of Zack Snyder when it comes to this character. This version of Pa Kent has something that other depictions don't have. One thing that I think is true of all parents that does get overlooked: fear. He is scared. He genuinely doesn't know, nor does he assume, how the world will react to the idea of his son being an alien with superhuman ability. Because this world doesn't even know that there is life on other planets. There's a good chance that Clark was going to be the first. How, pray tell, would a parent deal with that? I mean, I'm the son of adopted parents. I can barely tell how they could deal with a freak like me. Joking aside, I think that this makes sense, and that might surprise some people. But it does to me. Pa Kent does teach his son right from wrong, and knows when the time comes, he'll change the world, but he simply doesn't believe that the world is ready yet. And on top of that, that not knowing seems to create inner conflict that makes it hard for him to think even morally sometimes. And I like that, because in life, uncertainty makes it hard to make moral decisions. That's just a fact of life. Not to mention, given the immediate reaction of the United States military to Superman, I can't say that I disagree with him. People are shocked by him. People are scared of him. Except Lois, but still, she was scared of him when she first saw him. As for Clark himself, one thing I like about this is, again, he's not a guy who has all the answers. He's a guy who's learning. He's a guy who, in the process of discovering, he's not, at least at this point, an ubermensch. That's part of the reason I liked John Byrne's Superman, and Louise Simonson's Superman as well, alongside the most recent Superman runs by Dan Jurgens and Peter Tomasi. They showed a Man of Steel who was fearful, who didn't have all the answers. He did have one thing to fall back on, though, and that was his strong sense of right and wrong. It's the same type of writing that we saw in Superman the Animated Series and Justice League Unlimited. He needs to be able to get mad, to have problems, to have depth, to have uncertainty. Great Superman stories treat him as a human, not as some sort of a god. I don't need Super Jesus. I need Superman, if you get what I mean there. Anyway, seeing his journey across North America and then the joy he has of finally understanding where he's from is great. Like I said earlier, the first act of this film is very good. The second act, I feel, is of a similar quality. Clark comes across like a man who is ready to step into the public eye now that he knows more about himself, knows his capabilities, knows what he's made of. Not to mention, Zod forces his hand in a way that only General Zod would. From a military strategy point of view, Zod acts like a man who thinks that he has all the cards. And to his knowledge, he does. I really enjoyed the conversation as well between Lois and Clark in the interrogation room, and Clark's interaction with the military, in perfectly demonstrating that they have nothing to fear from him, that he's there to help, that he's there to protect, but he's there to follow the rules that they set, that he doesn't see himself above humanity. And there was one criticism that has been made of this film that I didn't feel was apt, as people saying that this was Super Jesus. I don't agree. This is a man who realizes that he has to go into the unknown to protect people. This is a very human character, and that's one thing I like about it. That was one reason I hated Superman Returns, but enjoyed the first two acts of this film upon rewatching them. It's a human character. And for someone raised on Earth, he should be a human character. He's a guy with superpowers raised in Kansas. How do you think he's going to act? I also saw people criticize the idea that he went to a church and to a priest for advice. Again, he's from Kansas. He's from the Midwest. Do you have any idea how many Christians are out here? There's a lot of us. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Clark was raised with a Bible in the household. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he went to church every Sunday. So why would it surprise anyone that a Midwestern boy would go to a pastor for advice? There are way too many atheists who are critics, man. Anyway, the lead up into the ship itself is really good too. Not to mention the escape is as well. You kind of start to see the way that Clark is going to interact and make choices, and based on what, and what's going to be a priority to him in the future. That he knows he's Kryptonian, he knows his background. But just because his people are there doesn't mean what they're doing is right. Now, the fight scene in Smallville is pretty intense too. But my only problem with it is that things still seem a bit grimdark. I don't really like seeing people get shredded to bits in a Superman story, and I didn't like that Superman didn't take the time to fly to the chopper where the Major is at and tell him to stand down or his men are going to get killed. That just kind of seemed like Zack Snyder's trying to be edgy here. Ooh, look at me, I'm having people in the military get killed. It doesn't really add anything. I think that you could take those elements out and the film would work pretty well nonetheless. Needless to say, though, that's a small gripe. The fight scene's tense. It's honestly really neat and really well thought out, aside from those little gripes that I have. So, I have to say, the second act of the film, setting up into the third with the world engine, is just... Again, it's good, it's just foreshadowing something for me in regards to how this film is going to go. The third act, starting with the world engine and ending with the battle between Superman and Zod, and of course the little conclusions, has its ups and downs. The ups are that everything in the sequence is tense. Everything. From the destruction of the world engine and trying to move around while losing his powers, regaining his powers, losing his powers, regaining his powers, is really, really neat. And it poses a unique challenge for Superman. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, there's this race against time to get this ship that Clark came in prepared to basically bomb the Kryptonian ship to get it the hell out of there and save the planet. It's a really neat idea. And this is where I feel like the military fits in a lot better as well. However, there is something that happens here that happens seemingly for its own sake. The death of iconic characters. And this is also a problem in the movie in general. I don't know if Zack Snyder felt because all other comic book movies seem to just kill people off that he should do it too. But the deaths in this film don't make any sense to me. At least not Emil Hamilton dying. Why does Emil Hamilton, the head of Star Labs, need to die? Why didn't he, after activating the bomb, grab a parachute and get out? That doesn't make any sense. It just is silly. In fact, why didn't anyone try to get the obvious civilian that is not Lois Lane off the ship? Ay caramba. On top of that, why did Pa Kent even have to die? That should have been the point where Clark leaves and starts fending for himself. Instead of having him be a teenager, have him be a college student or something like that. He goes in, he saves his dad from the tornado, and then he disappears so the world doesn't have to find out about him yet. Anyway, the fight between Zod and Superman in Metropolis is good as well. However, we reach the biggest problem, and what reminded me of why I haven't watched this film in a good while. Superman killing Zod. I'll say this. Rewatching this film has made me feel like the first and second acts are a lot better than I originally gave them credit for, and they have a lot more depth than I originally gave them credit for. They really nailed that sort of John Byrne or Louise Simonson version of Superman that I really enjoy. Down-home Kansas boy who happens to be an alien and wants to protect the people around him because it's the right thing to do. Superman in a nutshell. Then, instead of choking Zod unconscious, which he could have easily done from the position he's in, he kills him! Snaps his neck! Now wait a minute. If he can't move his head up, how does he have the strength to snap his neck? That doesn't make any sense. Beyond that, though, Superman does not kill ever. He doesn't need to kill. He's Superman. It's against everything he's ever believed in. And also, fuck Zack Snyder's logic behind this scene. He doesn't need to kill one guy to realize he shouldn't do it. I don't need to stick my dick in a pencil sharpener to know that it's a bad idea. I don't need to snort a mountain of cocaine just to find out it's not good for my heart or my septum for that matter. This didn't need to happen. Zod was beaten. Choke him unconscious. Or, if you're strong enough to break his neck, maybe you could just tilt his head up and start punching him with your other hand or something like that. Ugh. It really sours me on the entire film. This is part of the problem with the DCEU in general, though. This is something I've noticed throughout the years, and as I continue to look through these films, it's going to come up over and over and over again. There's a constant pressure of needing to be hip, or cool, or edgy, or in the now. Fuck that. Superheroes are timeless. They only ever need to be themselves. And for a film that seems to get Superman so well for 2/3 of it, it completely shits the bed at the end. To conclude, I wish this movie didn't have that third act. I don't. I wish that somebody else had done it. I wish Zack Snyder had not directed the film. I don't think that third act and the death of Zod would have even happened. He constantly feels the need, as a director, to shell out this sort of edgy shit into his films. Like the sex scene in Watchmen to the tune of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, this is something that's thrown in to try and get people talking, and it ruins the movie. I'm talking right now, buddy, and I don't have much to say that's positive. It could have been great. It could have been the best Superman film since Superman 2, but it wasn't. It just falls apart. Well, on to whatever film is next. My name is Micah Curtis. Welcome to my crusade. Dave's Vault.